Good morning. Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm Dan Celia. It's great to be here. And we've got something a little different. First segment today. We're going to get right into an interview with a friend, someone that my wife and I have grown a friendship with, and a fellow by the name of David Wheaton. And you all know David Wheaton because David Wheaton, if you listen to the program on Saturday mornings, Financial Issues, I know that you're listening to David Wheaton every morning. David, and I think, I don't know if it's David, Frank Turek, and me, or it's Frank Turek, David, and me, I'm not sure. But David Wheaton, Christian Worldview, great radio program. And if you don't listen, it's one that you need to begin to tune into every morning to hear some more truth about the world and the worldview coming from a biblical perspective that David does such a great job doing. But David has written a book, and it's called My Boy Ben, and it's a story about love, loss, and grace. And, you know, when I think about that, I always think that it is always such a blessing to have a book that ministers to us, particularly around the areas of loss and particularly around the area of showing us God's grace in some of those times. And this is a book that does that. And first of all, before we even get started, I want to tell everybody the book is available. You can get it. David can tell us how to get it from his website, but it's available in all bookstores. It's David Wheaton. It's My Boy Ben. My Boy Ben is the name of the book. And if you use in the coupon section when you order the book the word Dan, D-A-N, you'll get a $2 discount. I hope you'll all take advantage of that. But it is a great book. And the thing that I love about it, I was telling David this a couple days ago, is I have a sister that is not a believer, far from it, but she loves animals. She's a dog lover like we all are in my family, in my extended family. And this is a book that I've just sent to her. She's in Florida for the winter, and I just sent her the book. I know she's going to read it because she's an avid tennis player as well, and followed David. And I know she's going to read it, and I'm just praying that her heart is softened for the Lord through reading this book. David, welcome. Thank you for writing this book, by the way.
Oh, Dan, you're welcome, and thank you for having me on your program today. And I was listening to you talk about our longtime friendship, and that is true. And I know you may have forgotten this, but I haven't, that the organization that you used to work for years ago, you were integral in having that organization sponsor the Christian Worldview radio program when we first expanded outside Minneapolis to be in a more syndicated situation around the country. So thank you for all your support over the years.
Well, it's always been my joy, and I appreciate what you have done in this book and that you wrote this book. You and I are equally yoked in some of the feelings. My very first dog growing up was named Ben. We got him when I was born. He and I grew up together till he was 16, and I was 16.
Wow!
And he because of the home life in which I had, which wasn't an ideal situation. He was extremely important in my life. He was kind of my go-to a friend when I was in such need, and I really related to some of the stories you told in the book. Tell us though this theme of and how the minister, and you mentioned 2 Samuel, and we know the story so well of when Nathan went to David, and I love it. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and the story of the rich man, stealing this little lamb, and of course Nathan ended up saying, "You are that man." But tell us how that story ties into a part of this book.
Well, let me go just one step back and tell you why that story spoke so much to me, because Ben was a yellow lab that I had back when I was single in my late 20s, and I was still on the professional tennis tour, and how the journey with Ben from love to loss and then the grace that followed, that God used the journey with Ben to make a very lasting impact on my life and faith. So that's what the book's about. And I got Ben in a very unexpected way. I wanted to get a dog while on tour. I think I wanted some normalcy in the midst of that really unusual lifestyle of traveling all over the world and playing tennis tournaments and being gone all the time. And I had grown up with dogs too, and just wanted to have something like that in my life. Maybe I was a little lonely on the tour, wanted some companionship. Of course, I wouldn't be able to travel with the dog, and that was the problem, is that my parents would have to take care of a dog when I was gone, but they didn't really want to do that. They'd had enough of dogs in their life in the past, that they had had enough of dogs and didn't want that responsibility anymore. And so my parents, I won't go into the story now, it's in the book, but they sort of unexpectedly changed their mind when I was over in Tokyo playing a tournament, and I got a series of faxes over 3 days from my mother saying that she had seen a nice yellow lab in the neighborhood, and by the third day it was like she had put a down payment on a puppy who hadn't even been conceived yet. So anyway, but yes, as we got this puppy named Ben, he became very just a member of our family. And I think people who have beloved dogs know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that, as you do, Dan. And just they become a constant presence in their life. They bring a sweetness and a joy, and they just, whatever you're doing, whether it's going for a walk or going for a drive or whatever you're doing, they just make it a little more enjoyable and fun. And so as I had Ben for a few years, I was very close to him. Whenever I'd be home, he was constantly with me. I'd go to practice tennis. He'd be in the front seat of my Jeep on the way down to practice. He'd be sleeping beside the tennis court while I was practicing for 2 hours. Afterwards, we go over to the field and we do some sprints. He'd be right beside me. This dog was constantly with me. And I begin to question, whether maybe I'm devoting, too much of myself to a dog. Am I going beyond the companionship or the relationship that God intends for us to have with animals? And then, so that brings us to the story that you mentioned in 2 Samuel 12, or that I came across, and that really confirmed that, yes, God does intend for us to have the highest relationship with him and other people of our own kind, but we can also have a very deep and special relationship with our animals, that ones he created as well. And that story, if I could just read that short paragraph, it describes Nathan coming to David and the story of the rich man who had many flocks and coming and taking away the poor man's one little lamb. And the story says, the Lord sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and said, there were 2 men in one city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a great many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he bought and nourished, and it grew up together with him and his children. It would eat of his bread and drink of his cup and lie in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. Now, the point of the story is that the rich man, David, had taken away the poor man's one little lamb, Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. But it's very interesting, the story that God inspired Nathan to tell David, that he pictures this very close and intimate relationship with this man and his one little lamb, and it was like a daughter to him. And I can say that Ben was not my son, of course, but it was the same. He was like a son to me.
Yeah, and I've got to believe that Nathan told that story to David because David had could relate, to that. So it also, speaks of a relationship that David had, that David cared, that he was a righteous man. Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs, is it 9:12 or 12:9? I'm sorry, I shouldn't even brought it up. But, talks about that a righteous man cares for his animals. And, David being a righteous man, obviously he could relate to that story. And I'm sure that was one of the reasons why the Lord gave that story to Nathan.
And remember that David was a shepherd growing up, so I think it's probably very likely that he probably had relationship with some of his lambs, a very close and intimate relationships that spoke to him immediately.
There's also some humor that runs through this book. There is certainly some ministering times about loss. Give us one of your favorite themes that could speak to some of our listeners.
Yeah, well, the subtitle of the book is A Story of Love, Loss, and Grace, and that really does follow the track of the book. It's almost divided into thirds, and the first third is about just the close relationship that we can have with a dog, and that's that I had with Ben. Just the funny times, the unconditional love, the affection. As a matter of fact, there's a chapter in the book on why do we love our dogs so much? I mean, what is it about our dogs that, I mean, Americans in particular, and actually all over the world, this is the case, but there's just a special relationship that humans can have with dogs. And I think it goes down to our relational design, the way God designed us, but also the fact that they enhance and just enrich everything we do. So that would be how I describe that, the special relationship. But as we talk about the loss, Dan, this is a universal human experience. If love is one of the greatest joys that we have in life, then loss is one of the most painful experiences. So whether you've lost a beloved dog, like I lost Ben, or whether you maybe lost a beloved family member, and I'm not trying to equate those at all. I know there's a distinct difference between those, but they're both losses. Or maybe you've lost a job, or maybe you've lost a marriage, or maybe you've lost a dream in life. These things are painful. Right. And the question is, when we go through those, they're highly destabilizing. You know, it's like a physical pain grips us. It's hard to think about anything else. We begin to wonder where God is in all this, and why would he allow such a terrible loss to happen? And these are some of the thoughts that, you know, I had after losing Ben right in the prime of his life. I mean, he was 8.5 years old. This was a beautiful, intelligent, athletic, incredibly good pheasant hunting dog and so forth. And all of a sudden he got cancer and died. And I was shaken. As a matter of fact, Dan, I know you know my wife, Brody, but at the time we were dating, and I had just lost all appetite to do anything. And I actually felt like I needed to tell Brody that I just can't carry on for a while here. I need to get through this before I can. So it actually broke us up. And Brody thought it was for good. I always thought, well, I believe the Lord can bring us back together. And that's what he did a couple years later. But it was that much of a devastating loss for me at that particular time in my life. But that's where it gets to the third part of the book about grace, that God's grace is not only about salvation and sending his son. That's his big grace to live a perfect life, to die a perfect death for our sins, and to reconcile us with him. But he also has other kinds of grace, his sustaining grace in the midst of our hardest trials that gives us comfort and strength and hope and endurance in the midst of those really difficult trials. And that's exactly what happened to me, not only through those things like strength and hope he gave me, but also through circumstances as well.
We're speaking to David Wheaton, who wrote My Boy Ben. It's a story of love, loss, and grace, something that is you know, the themes throughout the three parts of this book. David sharing some of that with us. And let me just say to all the listeners out there, I highly recommend this book. I recommend this book because, you know, it did minister to me in a number of different ways, and it will minister to anybody. You don't have to be even a dog lover to benefit and be ministered to through this book. It is a wonderfully written and ministering book to all of us. And if you go, David, can they go to your website and get this book?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, that we'd love to offer your listeners, Dan, a $2 special discount on the book for signed and personalized copies if they use the coupon code Dan at my website, which is davidwheaton.com.
davidwheaton.com. My Boy Ben, you can also find it in bookstores, but go to davidwheaton.com, order their book, use the discount code Dan, and you'll get $2 off this book. So